Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. Both Zurich and Onepath life insurance offerings deliver the broadest range of offerings in the market with a combined 4 distinct solutions on offer to better serve all Australians. At Zurich and Onepath, we believe in the value of advice and the professionals who provide it. This means investing in more ways to help your clients and making it easier for you to do business with us. To find out more about how we can help you and your clients, contact your Zurich and Onepath Life or Zurich Investments representative today. G'day, Clayton here from XY Advisor. During our research into who the best guests were all over the globe for our mental health podcast series is Daniel, who's the author of The Behavioral Investor, as well as a couple other books. Mate, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you've got a really kind of interesting career in terms of you've got such a huge amount of experience, both from the financial planning side of things. Your dad was a financial planner and you work with financial planners through, it's Brinker Capital, right? Is the investment manager?
Mm-hmm. Brinker Capital, yeah.
Yeah. And you're also a clinical psychologist. And you've sort of somehow melded these two worlds together, which I'm a massive fan of. Can you talk us about... I guess, what are the insights that you would understand, but when you work with financial planners, you find that that's not as clear as it could be?
It's a great question. So let me think about what I bring as a clinician, I think, is a holistic understanding of people. You know, I think that one of the things that we've done in behavioral finance is we've gotten good at categorizing what people do poorly. Right? Like psychology started out the same way. It started out by telling people, this is what makes people sad. This is what makes people depressed. And it's only in recent years that psychology started to study, this is what makes people great. This is what makes people happy. This is what makes them a great leader. So I think most of the work in the psychology of finance or the psychology of investing has been around, let's call it irrationalities, like bias and biased decision-making. But I think there's so much that psychology has to say, from the way that we gather new clients, to the way that we communicate with our clients, to the way that we serve as almost a life coach to our clients and help bring about greater levels of wellness in them. So I hope that financial planning as a field will begin to embrace psychology more holistically, not just in terms of lists of biases and sort of gotcha for clients when they screw up.
Yeah. And if one of the co-founders of XY Advisor over here in Australia, Ray Jaramis, he actually did a psychology degree and he was already a financial planner, right? So he got into financial planning. I came at it from an accounting background and he came at it from a psychology background. And the way that the words that he uses very much reflects that modern style of financial planning, which is that whole life coaching mixed in with the balance sheet, right? If we consider for a moment, one of the worst things that can happen in someone's life is to claim on insurance, right? Let's say that they're injured or they're sick to a point that they can't work anymore. A concept that I've been sort of playing around in my mind is, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Let's say a financial planner does a really good job and they organize the insurances for their clients to a degree that their client, in the event of accident or illness, never has to work again, right? Is that, to your opinion, having someone, let's say, our age, right? Let's say someone our age can never work again from mental illness, right? So something that isn't, physical. Do you think it's the best idea to have them sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day, claiming on the insurance? Or do you think rehabilitation and getting them back out there and becoming a productive member of society is the priority, or is it just a case by case scenario, or do you have an opinion either way?
So I feel a little bit out of my depth here. First of all, I'm not sure of, at least in the US, which has a notoriously bad healthcare system, I'm not sure of many mental illnesses that would allow a young person to just claim insurance benefits for the rest of their life. I mean, I can't think of much that would allow that to happen. So it's a tricky thing, because I think when you talk about mental illness, on the one hand, you want people to understand that it's real, right? You want people to understand that it's real, that it's powerful, that in many cases it's even organic, right? That people are born with tendencies or predispositions that make life very difficult for them. But on the other side of things, if we talk about mental health in an overly deterministic way, and we talk about it in a way where people have no options and that they can't improve their mental health through their decision making, I mean, I sort of reject that extreme as well, because I think there's many things, speaking in general, that most people can do to improve their mental health. So I think just as guiding principles, we need to be compassionate about mental health. It is a real thing. But like anything in life, it's biological, it's psychological, it's sociological. And we need to attack that from every area. I think there's things that we can do as a culture to improve mental health. I think that Western culture is not very conducive to good mental health. I think a lot of the expectations we have, I think our consumer-driven society is in many respects not conducive to good mental health. I think that social media is not conducive to good mental health. I think that, a lot of the social structures that are eroding make good mental health harder and harder. So it's a delicate balance of saying, yes, mental health is real. There's organic elements to mental health, but also empowering people to do something about that to the extent possible. And so it sort of defies easy characterization, but I think those are the two poles you're always sort of tugging on.
Yeah. One of the things I think is probably unique in down here is, we've got this thing where occasionally people can get into such a stressful state that they can claim on a lifetime of insurance. And I kind of just want to dive into one of the things that you mentioned just there, which was a lot of the Western culture is not promoting good mental health. And for me, it's the weirdest thing in the world, right? Because I go, well, the world has, from a comfort level, has never provided more comforts. From a resources level, it's never provided more resources. And it's almost as if, and this is sort of a layman's view of it, but it's also as if, as we've removed, as a society, removed, barriers and difficulties and challenges, there's just a certain segment of society that finds the simplicity, or I guess the ability to check out, to say it's all too hard. I'm just going to live within the comforts that I can easily obtain, promotes, this idea that struggle is a bad thing, and then all I should be, catered to is comforts and my rights. And it kind of ended up in this weird situation where we've got this huge mental health problem. From a clinical psychologist point of view, is that accurate in any way, or am I way off course?
No. So what I think you're talking about is on target, and so I would cite Dr. Martin Seligman's PERMA model. So Seligman, positive psychologist, developed a model of holistic wellness, and it's got 5 facets to it. So the first of these facets, so it's PERMA, that's an acronym. The first of the P in PERMA stands for positive experiences. So these would be sort of creature comforts and fun, right? So we want whatever, ice cream, trips to the movies, like watch Netflix, all these things are fun. And that's a part of wellness, right? That's not nothing. But when you ask people what makes them well, most people overemphasize fun and ease. And that's just one of the 5 things that makes us, well-rounded and truly happy. I'll talk about the others in a minute, but we've gotten to a point now as a society where that ease and that fun has become so pervasive that it can actually become our undoing. More people die now of obesity than die of scarcity. So we're more likely to die of overabundance of food and calories than we are from underabundance of food and calories. And that distinction was almost unthinkable, 100, 200, 1,000 years ago. So the other 4 things are engagement, which is hard work, relationships, meaning, and advancement. So, think about this. Fun is one aspect of it, but like hard work is one aspect of it. And I don't think that many people are saying, I want to go be truly happy. Let me go work super hard at something. And yet, that's a big piece of it. You think about something like meaning. For much of human history, meaning was sort of in the air. If you lived in France in the 1500s, or anywhere basically in the Western world in the 1500s, meaning was being a Christian. And so now that's not the case, right? And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I don't much care what people's religious preferences are, but at least it was something. People had a sense of meaning in their life. And so as traditional sources of meaning start to erode, again, not saying if that's good or bad, I don't much care, but people need meaning. Yeah. You have to replace it with something. You have to replace it with service or charitable work or family or something that's bigger than yourself. So a lot of these things don't look the way people think they look. People don't think that happiness looks like sacrifice or hard work or doing something for a friend. But in fact, the research says, happiness and wellness looks a lot different than we think. And it has, it's way more multifaceted than just ease or comfort.
You've nailed better than what I was trying to say. It's absolutely. PERMA model sounds awesome, man. I'm going to check that out. Yeah. So because with your work, you deal with financial planners quite a lot. If you now again, this is probably slightly out of scope for your role, but I'm interested still in your opinion because I do think that you're really well placed. And that is, if an advisor has depressed clients, right? Where an advisor, as you probably well know, we think the job is over here. And as we get in, we start talking about people and their money and their life. We realize we end up in that life coaching position and let's face it, completely unprepared. It sort of just gets put onto us from the first meeting. And then you just develop the school sort of on the job over the course of, sometimes decades, right? Dealing with depression, I think, is one of those things which is an advanced mental state, which on-the-job training isn't really particularly the best, I guess, the best experience to have walking into that conversation. For example, I remember reading a book once called The Happiness Trap. And to summarize, it was essentially like the tips and tactics that someone uses to sort of snap themselves out of the majority of problems in life are the exact wrong tactics to use when things are legitimately genuinely bad. And so like the concept of resilience works really well most of the time, unless it's like overwhelming. And then that resilience butts up against the reality of depression. And then you kind of get into a bit of a spiral, I guess. And so while it's not insanely common to have depressed clients, but what kind of advice would you give, even if it's, hey, go learn actually how to deal with this, but what kind of advice would you give to advisors who have depressed clients?
So I would say that it's very common. So the lifetime prevalence of major depressive disorder is about 1 in 2. So I think,
Wow.
about half of us at some point or another, that's not all the time, but about half of us so at some time in our lives will have a diagnosable clinical episode of depression, right? So I think it's important for financial advisors to understand what is and isn't their role. What's not their role is to treat depression, right? Because depression, like you said, is when it kind of gets out of bounds. All of us get sad, right? The distinction between sadness and depression is when sadness becomes depression when it starts to impact the tasks of daily living, when you can't function, right? All of us have mornings where we don't want to get out of bed because we're sad. Depressed folks literally cannot get out of bed. So the minute it crosses over from being sort of irksome to actually impacting the way you move through the day, that's sort of a good working definition of depression, or really any mental illness for that matter, is when it starts to impact the task of daily living. Where an advisor can be useful is they can be a referral source. And it's always a little touchy, right? It's always a little touchy to say, hey, you should go to therapy, right? Because if it's we kind of throw that around flippantly. When people meet me, I mean, they mean well, they're just joking. But when people meet me and they hear what I do, they go, oh, you should talk to my wife, or, you should talk to my cousin or something.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're going to do, is sort of, dismissively throw people out of shrink. And so I think there's a way for a financial advisor to recognize the symptoms of depression or whatever mental illness when a period of sadness or whatever is interfering with the task of daily living. I think that financial advisors should be ready to provide a referral or point people in a good direction, kindly, compassionately. 25% of visits to primary doctors, so medical doctors, end in a referral to a psychologist. So a lot of what people come to general practitioners or physicians with, things like, I can't sleep, or, my back aches, or I have, irritable bowels, or, whatever these things that manifest themselves physically really have a psychological underpinning. And that's why so much of a doctor's job is to refer folks to a psychologist. Likewise, financial advisors may have clients that present with problems around overspending, or sort of trying to make themselves happy through spending, or different things, and can need to be prepared to say to their clients gently, like, look, I think this is above my pay grade. I think this is something that you should talk to someone about, and I have some good options for you. So I think, in the US at any given time, about 1 in 5 people are taking medication for depression.
Wow.
I don't know what the numbers look like in elsewhere in the world, but I think you financial advisors have a lot more depressed clients than they probably are aware of. And to the extent that they can be a resource, I think that's a positive thing.
Well, yeah, that's a really, really good point. So probably to that end, then, it would make sense for an advisor to have not just a home loan referral, not just an accountant referral, but also have a psychologist, in the book, so to speak, to refer clients to.
I think it makes absolute sense. And I think there's a soft way to perhaps introduce that person. If you're doing client events, we'll often do client events with different types of professionals. Why not bring a psychologist in to talk about wellness and productivity and happiness, and, get your clients accustomed to meeting with this person, destigmatize that. I think it's a wonderful thing. And, I think it can work both ways, because having sat on both sides of that table, just from a strictly commercial standpoint, many times people will come to a therapist with financial problems that the therapist knows nothing of, right? I think that can be, not that that's why you would do it, right? Not that that's your primary reason for doing it, but I think it could become a mutually beneficial relationship with each of the professionals handing off clients as needed.
Huh. That's a really good point. I mean, advisors are always looking for who is that, what we call a center of influence to have, amongst, different professions. And that's a really, really good point. I'm interested to see your view on probably something that you spend a bit more of your day talking about, and that is the current market. Right. So working in investments and working in psychology and working with advisors, everyone's heard of every advisor worth a grain of salt knows how to handle the conversation as it's down, buy more, don't stress out. I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more advanced than that. So what are kind of some of the topics of conversations that you help advisors have with their clients in moments like this, when, we're seeing the early stages of what may be or may not be, but more and more looking likely to be a serious downturn in the market? How can advisors handle mentally their own role, and then the effect that it has on their clients?
Yeah, so keeping with our wellness theme, Dr. Brad Klontz did some work. He's a financial therapist. He did some work a while back, and he found that 93% of financial advisors who were working through the Great Recession of 08-09, 93% of them showed evidence of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, even in some respects. So this is like, some of this stuff is like what people who've gone to war exhibit, or people who've experienced a great trauma. So the role of a financial advisor is effectively to be a barrier between their client and a really bad decision. At a time like this, when things are volatile, like you are the last hope between your client and doing something really stupid. And so to be that last hope, you have to be sort of a sponge for their fear, their anxiety. You have to be a little bit of a punching bag for this ill will that they may be feeling, and you have to absorb that. And it's a form of secondary trauma. So I think the first thing that advisors really need to keep in mind is that they have to take care of themselves at a time like this, because their clients are looking to them. And more than the specific words, that advisor is saying, their demeanor, their look, how well rested they are, all of these things convey a subtext about whether or not that client needs to worry. And that client is picking up verbal and nonverbal cues from that advisor. So it's a time to take good care of yourself, to get adequate exercise, good nutrition, good rest, limit alcohol and caffeine, all the things that no one's doing right now, right? Like all the things that everyone's ignoring. I've been sleeping terrible for a month, so that's, sort of job one. To your second question, I have a 3-part system that I developed at Brinker for having conversations with clients who are in distress. And so it's 3 P's. So the first P is purpose. So we recenter that client on their plan. We remind them why they came in the first place. We remind them that they have a plan, that bad markets were part of that plan, and that maybe we didn't see the specifics of coronavirus coming, but we did see, a 20% downturn in the markets coming. This wasn't unplanned for. When we put this whole thing together, it's why we have protection. It's why we diversify, right? So recenter them on their purpose, get them thinking long-term again, because the effect of fear and stress is to make us very short-term. Our body marshals all of its resources, right? Everything gets focused very acutely on the here and now so that we can throw a punch or run away, right? Because our body can't differentiate between physical stressors like physical danger and psychological danger. Mm-hmm. And so we get very short term, and the advisor's first job has to talk about purpose, get them thinking long term again. Okay. The second thing we need to do is we need to give them proof. We need to show them in the history of the markets what happens after times like this, right? When markets drop 20, 25%, what tends to play out over the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, right? Give them a sense of the roadmap and give them a sense that you know what you're talking about. Because at a time of great uncertainty, people want to know that they are in good hands. People want to know that there was someone smart. They want to know that they're with an authority figure. So you need to hit them with some proof next. And then the third thing we say is you need to give them a process. Okay. You need to give them something to do, because everybody knows the thing to do right now is nothing, right? Like everybody knows the thing to do right now is to stay the course. But you're telling somebody with $1 million account who just lost $250,000 because of some virus that they never heard of till last week, and it just ate away at a quarter of their hard-earned wealth. You're just telling them to chill out. Like, it feels very, very flippant, right? And so we have a propensity to want to act in a time of crisis. So we can try and fight that. We can try and tell people like, hey, chill out, don't act, don't do anything. Or we can roll with it a little bit, right? We can say, I know you want to do something, so let's do something that's not going to blow you up, right? Maybe that's rebalancing. Maybe that's putting in some crash bids. Maybe there's some companies you wanted, some individual names you wanted to own, but they've been too expensive. So you put in some crash bids and you go, hey, let's hope the market falls another 10%. And you're going to own, XYZ stock, right? Maybe it's giving them a book, right, on how markets work so they can be learning and growing during this time. Maybe it's being charitable and counting your blessings and saying, look, you've got a job through this. And so while things are rough right now, maybe part of what we can do that during this time is support frontline medical professionals or others who are fighting COVID-19. I don't care what it is. Like, give them something to do that's not liquidating their account and going to cash. So those are the 3 steps. Recenter on purpose, give them some proof of how markets work, and then give them a process, give them something to do that'll keep them headed in a good direction.
I mean, good financial planning ensures that there's a couple of, years worth of cash, especially if someone's over that age of 55, and the sequencing risk if someone's in a position where they're, close enough to retirement that a 25% downturn in the market is going to have a substantial impact, then I guess first and foremost, you probably haven't done your job as a financial planner. Your goal is to ensure that growth where possible and more appropriate when you're closer to retirement. But I like this. So first and foremost, purpose, then proof, then process. That's, in a nutshell, that is good financial planning. I'm a big fan of that. How much of your view of financial planning came from your dad, and how much has it come from your experience?
Very little of it came from my dad, because my dad's been in the business for 40 years. So I'm 40 years old. My dad actually got his job on the day that I was born. So that was my dad was mowing yards, and he got his job as a financial advisor on the day that I was born. But my dad really grew up, 40 years ago in an entirely different world than we now inhabit. Now, he's, of course, improved his practice and has come around to the ways. But 40 years ago, you were selling, whatever, like you were selling mutual funds with an 8% front load and making $100 every time you traded. It was a very, 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 very different world where people went from, trying to pick the next hot dot to where we are today of holistic financial planning. So my dad has been a wonderful career counselor and confidant, but he's kind of had to come around, I think, as many people from that generation have, and he has, but he's come around to a more holistic model. It's certainly not what I grew up hearing about, though. I grew up hearing about his thesis on like the next stock that was going to shoot through the roof.
That's cool, though. I always like, funnily enough, later today, I'm jumping on a call with an advisor that's 75 years old, and he's just done 40 years in the industry. And I said, mate, before you go, we've got to do a podcast and grab some of those, those nuggets that before they're lost to the end of time. You got to preserve this sort of stuff. So that's super interesting. When you were younger, did you have any idea that you'd be working in financial markets, in finance at all? Or because I'm chatting with you here, I can see 2 guitars in the background. So so how did that journey come about?
No, I used to be cool. And
I know the feeling, mate.
Then the man got to me.
Exactly.
No, so I went. I did not. So I went to school, my freshman year. I went to school to become a psychologist, got my undergraduate in psychology, started my Ph.D. 3 days after I finished my undergraduate. So I was 23 when I started my Ph.D., just started cruising. And I was like, I'm going to be a therapist. About 3 years into a 5-year Ph.D. program, I started to hate it. It was just, it was very stressful, meeting with 40 or 50 people who a week, many of whom were suicidal, many of whom who had endured really terrible stuff, some of whom were children who were in a horrible spot because of things that adults had done to them. It was so heavy, and I was bringing it home every weekend, and I could, it's like I was newly married at this point, and my wife's like, hey, let's go out, and it's the weekend. And I'm like, the world is too bad, the world is too evil. So I started to look for non-clinical applications of psychology. I knew I loved psychology. I knew I loved thinking about human behavior, but I wanted to apply it in a non-medical setting. And so, my dad said, look, there's a lot of psychology in what I do. And I initially said, what are you talking about? You're a numbers guy. And I think this is a common misconception people have. I mean, I did, and I should have known better. People think that good financial planning is all about crunching numbers, and it's 20% numbers and 80% psychology. And so once I learned that, it's off to the races.
Man, that's super interesting. For the advisors out there who want to reach out, learn more about Brinker Capital, learn more about what you do, maybe purchase your book, how do they go about finding out more information?
Yeah, so I write a lot on the Brinker Capital blog. There's a whole behavioral finance section there. It's a great place. Active on LinkedIn, Daniel Crosby, Ph.D., and active on Twitter at Daniel Crosby. So all easy ways to reach me.
Awesome, man. Look, thank you so much for dialing in from the other side of the world. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.